Hello! I gave a scrap for Angela at the Traveling Crafter. So she asked me to join her Give a Scrap collab. This would be really, I think, my third collab at this point now for working with people. And so I come to share with you what I came up with for my Give a Scrap. I did, when we did the master boards for Hazel at Hazel and Aka Design, I made these little, pockets or journaling cards with scraps of my yarn. So I have lots of yarn scraps because I play with yarn a lot. Those are ones, I haven't decorated these yet. Those are just the cuts. Here's some I had already decorated. So I kind of thought, well, I still have tons of yarn scraps. So what else can I do? And that's kind of what I've come up with. So for the first thing I'll show you, well, let me start out here. So my we and I, we have some magazines that are, we need to use up the scraps from our magazines and collaging. So we took some magazine pages and we made some paper beads. That was her first time making paper beads on her own, and some of these I made, but actually it's kind of difficult to tell. She did such a great job. So that was using up some of our scraps. I still have them on the dowels because we thought they looked kind of cool like that. So that may end up being something that could go, in a pot or something, just because it looks different and neat. But nonetheless, those are little paper beads. So that was one of mine and Wee's Scrap Buster. This is what I end up with, jars of this. And I have several jars. And for the cards, the cards and for the projects I'm showing you today, they all came out of this one jar. It was absolutely packed. So all of these projects, and I still have plenty left. The first thing I did was I just grabbed the pieces that were a little bit longer and I just started tying them on this old, you can see it's even worked because we've had it for a few years and over time it's gotten crunched and crushed. But, I thought let's tie them on here. And I've actually done something very similar to this before, so I'm just tapping into an old idea. And because I knew that it would take me forever to cover this whole thing, I just made polka dots. And I didn't trim them. Of course, you could always trim them if you wanted to, but I was working with very irregular. But I do know sometimes people might have the little strips that are already for hook rug making. Maybe you've inherited some or you found some. I don't know what to do with that. Well, get a little wire basket. You can buy them big, small. This is a trash basket. And you can tie them on. Some I looped, some I tied. And I just made these kind of poofy polka dots. Anyway, my wee one thinks it's adorable. She loves it. So it was in front of her desk. So it's going back by her desk. Our polka dot. Our polka dot trash waste basket. The other thing I did was I had recently received some dishes. I have several of these exact teacups and saucers, like a bunch of them, a bunch. I'd say at least 12, if not possibly 16 each. So, and I happily took them because they weren't wanted anymore. And I had planned on using them to make, exactly this, little pin cushions. So that's what I did. So, I have glued it. This is the finished. But before I had glued the cup on, I took some fabric. I cut it out into the size I was looking for. Stuffed it with my yarn scraps. And then I, whip stitched it closed and hot glued it down into the teacup. I added this is actually some ruffle. I had a lot of ruffle and I thought it kind of looked like a little bit of cream. And there's some of my little creations. There's one of the crochet buttons I'd made and a little crochet heart. And I just popped my little pins in the holes. There's some extra pins. I'll put this cute little bow onto the plate. I thought that was kind of cute. And, if you set a needle or you know, if you're doing something, it can also act as a quick, you know, place down. And when I was looking through my fabrics, I found this, it was already cut. It was in a weird thing. I've whip stitched it, but I stuffed it. And I cinched the edges, and I thought it kind of looked like a little scone or something. So I had that on my plate. And then I was like, that looks very pretty. But then I thought, no, I need a tea bag for my needles. So I took some white fabric that was left over from deconstructing some linens, table linens. And in the past, I'd ice-dyed these or done different things, made you know, tore them to make strips. But for this, I cut it out, stitched around it on my machine, and then turned it into a little tea bag. I put a staple there because why not? I even made myself. This was actually the tag off of the coasters that I used for one of the projects for the Beauty and the Bee, and it just happened to be sitting next to me. I thought that's perfect for a tea bag. I didn't end up using it. It was off some packaging, so I didn't use it for the Beauty and the Bee collab, but it was absolutely perfect for my tea bag. So I put my favorite little needle on there, and that's where you know, I can keep my little needles, and then the pins up here, and it just sits there on my teacup with my little pastry. I think this is adorable. I love it. And now I can make, you know, a dozen more. So I'm going to make a few more and give them away as gifts. I think those are really neat. Okay, so those are my two scrappies. And then while I was thinking, this is something I've made a while back, but it's hanging up in my Wee's room. She has kind of a magical room, but this was also made with scraps, the leftover bits of yarn. So I took one of those metal, cheap metal vintage picture frames, took the glass and the back off. I wrapped it with the yarn, and then I wrapped it again with yarn, and then on the front I weaved different, you know, the yarns, and so those were just left over from projects, and I created this kind of under the sea. These are some beads all bundled together. This was another little bit of yarn, and I added the bees. It's kind of like a little, you know, some kind of sea, you know, creature or sea plant. And these were just some string beads that just kind of looked cool weaved in there. And then, of course, a few buttons, sparkly buttons, and some fish buttons. And I think that it turns out so stinking cute. So the back, this is what it would have looked like before I had weaved onto it. And so great way to, you know, repurpose those metal ugly frames that you may not like. But in my case, I had several left in an attic when we moved in the house. So I didn't want to throw them out. I came up with things to do with them. And this is one of them. And that was using, like I said, some yarn that was left over from my early days of crocheting. And just enough for a project like this. So there you go. Thank you, Angela, for asking me to come and play scraps. And I did that, and I've had a really good time. This was kind of fun. I've been wanting to make this little teacup for such a long time that you definitely encouraged me by doing that to say, I'm going to make a teacup with those, because that's what I was thinking before, for all those scrap bits to stuff in my little teacups I'd been given. And I think it turned out really cute. And the trash can. The trash can is also really cute. But you can find smaller containers for your desk or, you know, different things. And just cut up lace, strips of fabric, yarn if you have it, anything. And make a little fuzzy basket. You could actually, you know, do it and then trim it down. It's almost like a poof ball, you know, or a pom-pom. Some other scrappy ideas. Oh, it just flew out of my head. I can't remember now. So I'm sure I'll remember it at some point. But just different things that I've done while upcycling and trying to use through the scraps. That, because I'm still new to paper arts, you know, I actually don't have paper scraps. I typically end up using them. I do things like this, you know, where I just glue. I just actually enjoy gluing. So like this was, I pulled this notebook out to use for my Beauty and the Bee. And so everything I cut from that Beauty and the Bee just ended up on these pages. I doubt that I cut them. But I have others like this. And that was just the one I'd started there. I just enjoy gluing onto papers, just gluing for, you know, no reason whatsoever, except I enjoy doing that. So I didn't really have a lot of paper because I already kind of do that. But the yarn I have a lot of, you know, because I've been yarning for a lot longer than papering. And, I have a problem throwing away. I think the little scraps look beautiful just in the jar. So using them up in my projects just seems like a really fun thing for me to play with. So I don't know what collab I'll be in next, but I'm sure I'll try to figure out if I can come up with another yarn scrap. I think I have about 4 or 5 more jars of yarn lying around here in my craft room. I'm looking around and I can see at least 2 or 3 of them. 3, 1, 2, yeah, 3. So yeah, maybe I'll find other things. I might run out of things, so it'd be great if anybody had any other ideas. All right, thank you for watching. I'll have all of the information below for the collab. I'm still so new. I don't actually know anyone that I could tag for the collab. Angela had asked us if we could tag someone, and I think just about anybody that I already know in a way that I would feel comfortable possibly tagging them have already joined up. So if you are watching this and you have not been tagged, or you had not heard of this collaboration and you think it would be fun, then, you know, consider yourself invited to join. And then I'll have the information in the hashtag and the channels below. So if you are interested, please go and check out the other creators. I'm late this collab, so I've really enjoyed watching everybody's fabulous ideas for using up the scraps that they have. And so I encourage any of my crafty friends to, you know, do the same if you're not already there. Okay? And I'll see you in the comments section. Bye!